All right, let's continue with another example of trying to find principles out of rules that Ellen White gave us. And let's take a touchy issue, all right, that of what to do on the Sabbath. All right, what to do on the Sabbath. Okay. Now, now hang on there. Just don't throw anything at me. And let's skip this one now. Okay. How about cooking on the Sabbath? How about cooking on the Sabbath? Well, here she says, Testimonies, Volume 6. Cooking upon the Sabbath should be avoided. A couple pages earlier, on Friday, let the preparation for the Sabbath be completed. See that all the cooking is done. So what's the context? Well, first of all, let me say this. Now, I'm really going to get everybody riled up here by what I say, but okay. Europeans don't cook on the Sabbath. They play soccer on Sabbath. I got you there. And Americans, they don't play soccer on Sabbath, but they cook on Sabbath. Okay? It just depends on the context and so on. We all approach Sabbath a little differently. All right? We all do. All culture, all people, depending on our education. Sometimes it's even homes. One home will be like this, and the same culture, same people, same church, and the other home right down the street will keep Sabbath in a different way. So there's a lot of that's happening.
How do you equate to when it says clearly in the Fourth Commandment about cooking, and it doesn't say anything about soccer anywhere else?
Oh, I know. I knew that I was going to get some people upset. But that. Oh yeah, there are plenty of Europeans who play on soccer on Sabbath. Oh, there are plenty of Europeans. Well, maybe not Romania, or I don't know where you're from, so that's okay. It's the danger of doing generalization here, and putting everybody in the same basket. Okay, let's move on. Ellen White gave us a couple counsels. No cooking on the Sabbath. Okay, no cooking on the Sabbath. So how are we to relate to that today? Does that change? How are we to relate to cooking on the Sabbath? Well, let's look at the context first of all. Let's begin with the context. Whatever you look, I think you may look at just about every quote of Ellen White regarding cooking on the Sabbath, and they're all the same. None of it should be done. So let's look at the context. Let's go back 100 years ago, and let's prepare a meal together 100 years ago. Okay, let's do the little fun here, and let's do that. You may remember your grandparents doing that. Okay, we've got these old-fashioned cooking stoves. You know, the ones that have decks, and you got to feed with wood. They're wood stoves. And so if you start a meal any time during the week, you got to, first of all, you do it from scratch. And what we mean from scratch is not opening a few cans. We've got to do it from scratch. That means you got to mix the flour if you're going to have bread. If you're going to have some kind of a meat substitute, you got to do it right there on the spot. If you've got to have some kind of a stew, you got to do it. You got to do it from scratch. You got to cut the potatoes. You got to peel the carrots. You got to cook and bake the bread and so on. Bake the pies, and on and on and on. It takes an awful lot of time. Making a meal 100 years ago is a hard work. But anyway, you do all the preparation, then you got to cook it. And to cook a meal means you got to have the fire going, but the fire has to be even. You cannot get away from that stove. If you do, either you lose the heat because you don't feed the stove, or you burn things. And if you're baking bread, you've got that little indicator there, that little needle on the front of the oven door. You've got to make sure that that needle stays in a particular range. And so that's your wood will help you do that. And at the same time, you've got a boiler at the other end of the stove that will boil water. And on. So you've got to be right there close. It's labor intensive to do a meal 100 years ago. There are no microwave ovens. There are no TV dinners where everything is ready and just put it in the oven, let it bake, let it heat, and so on. That does not exist. So when Ellen White said 100 years ago, do not cook on the Sabbath. Do not cook on the Sabbath. She was talking about something here, wasn't she? She said to ladies of the house, do not cook on the Sabbath. The Sabbath is for you too. You see, the men don't cook on the Sabbath. They don't cook anytime. Watch out now, huh? What? That's all right. So, men don't cook. Men will be on the farm. They will work hard all week with the horses and the cows and harvest and gardens and so on. I mean, there's a lot of hard back-breaking work. That's what they'll do. Whatever happens inside of the house is the fiefdom of the lady. That's her kingdom. And she takes care of it. He takes care of what's outside. She takes care of what's inside. I think Ellen White is saying to ladies here, the Sabbath is for you too. And you keep it too. And so that means that you don't do preparation on Sabbath. You do it the day before. And you prepare your meals ahead of time so that when we get to Sabbath, you can keep Sabbath too. I think that's what she's trying to say here if we look at the context of what's going on. Now, things have changed a whole lot. I agree. Things have changed a whole lot today. Things are a whole lot easier. It's a lot of the custom now that we've got meals are ready, or half ready. And we just put them in the microwave or put them in the oven before we go to church and put the timer on and everything else. By the time we get back home, it smells good in the house and the meal is cooked and so on. It's the oven has done our work. We didn't have to do it. So, no, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. So let's look at some principles. What is she trying to say here? I think over and over, she tries to tell us that nothing that could be done on the previous 6 working days should be left to Sabbath hours. And that's not only cooking. That's anything. If you can do it on the other 6 days, you don't just do it on the Sabbath. You don't vacuum on Sabbath. You don't wash floors on Sabbath. The big part of the meal preparation, you don't do it on Sabbath, and on and on. Just let's respect the Sabbath hours. I think that's the principle she's trying to give us here. If it can be done another day, let's do it another day. Another principle, I think, that goes right along with that one is that any unnecessary work should not be done on the Sabbath. If it's not necessary, if it can wait, let it wait. Of course, I'm not talking about an emergency here. Something happens in your house, something breaks, and you've got to pick it up, or you've got to fix it, you've got water running, whatever it may be. Window broken, you've got to do something. You've got to be reasonable. That's fine. You've got to use common sense. You have a car trouble on Sabbath. You're stranded on the road. Well, you've got to do something. You just can't leave it there. You can't stay there. You've got to be safe. You've got to pick up pieces somehow. Those are different kinds of things. Those are emergencies. Let's not make rules for the Sabbath keeping out of emergencies, out of odd situations, but out of normal day-to-day life, as it can be. I think the principle here is, if it can be avoided, let's avoid it. If it can be done some other days, let's do it some other days. And let's use our common sense. The way I do it will be different the way from you do it, but let's try to use our common sense there regarding that. I think that's an idea I get from that. There's a lot of common sense that comes along here too. There's both Christian and common sense. It's common sense regarding how we do things regarding Sabbath. There are self-timing ovens and microwaves. I've mentioned that. Cooking is no longer a very huge time-consuming thing, but you know, it can become if you want to. If you decide to have a full-blown big meal on Sabbath, it will take you a lot of time to prepare nowadays too. That's not much difference. So Sabbath preparation should be done on Friday as much as possible. These are principles I get out of that. I don't want to be specific about tiny little rules. Should I cook this? Should I not cook this? Should I wash this and not wash that? No, I think it's the idea here. It's the idea, the principle. I think we've become very relaxed regarding Sabbath keeping. I think overall, not speaking only about myself, but about everybody here, I think we've become somewhat relaxed. Not sure we are caring as much now as we used to, you know. Well, should we be tensed about it? No, I don't think so. I think, yeah, Frederick, your comment is very, very fair. I don't think we should be tense about Sabbath keeping. I don't think we should be legalistic and making it so hard upon ourselves and upon our children. I think we should be kind regarding Sabbath keeping. But we should be mindful also that it's a day of rest. I think we should be mindful of that. And however you want to do it in your home, that's up to you, between you and God. But we should be raising perhaps some consciousness here regarding how to do things. How about this one? Taking a bath on the Sabbath. This is the same quote, the same passage, the same chapter in Testimonies, Volume 6. Well, let's do the same thing. On Friday, let the preparation for the Sabbath be completed. See that all clothing is in readiness, that all the cooking is done. Let the boots be blacked, shined, and let the baths be taken. Let's take a bath 100 years ago. All right? Let's take a bath 100 years ago, 150 years ago. Let's take a bath. All right? There's no running water. No running water. And that means you've got to bring in this huge tub. You've seen some of them perhaps that our grandparents had. Huge tub. It's about 2 feet high. It's big. And you've got to fill it with water, so cold water and hot water. But how do you get hot water? The stove. You've got to boil it. So you've got to feed the stove, and you've got to boil the water, and you transfer it to this huge tub. And there, where do you put the tub? Bathrooms are not necessarily existing yet. So you use the kitchen sometimes. That's where you put the big tub. And then you take baths. Are you, all of you, one by one, going to use brand new water? No way. The father starts, and then the mother, and then the kids, and so on. It's one after the other. Are you going to lounge in this water for an hour? No way. You're going to be in that tub. You're going to take your bath. You're going to take it within 5 minutes. You wash, you scrub, and you get out. Somebody else gets in before the water gets cold. And you do that. Now let's say you've got 3 or 4 children. And you take all your baths Friday afternoon. What kind of a mess do you think the place looks like after the baths are taken? What do you do with that water? Well, you got to dump it out, bucket at a time. Dump it out. Then you got to roll that tub out somewhere, put it wherever it belongs. And then you need to wash the floors. Then you need to scrub, you clean. I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess. It's a real mess. So taking a bath 100 years ago, 125 years ago, is a real endeavor. It's a real work on a Friday afternoon. No wonder she said, don't take your baths on Sabbath. No wonder. Today things have changed a whole lot, haven't they? It takes 5 minutes to take a quick shower, and you're done on Sabbath morning, whether Friday night. If you've got little children, though, that can become a little bit of a chore to have baths on Friday night or on Sabbath. So I want to do those, at some other times. I know a lot of parents who really believe that it's a good thing to give kids baths on Friday before Sabbath begins, because it's a chore. It's a real chore for the mother to do that. You've got 2 or 3 that are little toddlers. It's a little pain. It's demanding. The mother needs to keep Sabbath too. And so let's do the baths at some other times. Things have changed a whole lot for us. I think there's good here. Good principles are being established and given to us. Let's be careful as to how we keep Sabbath. She talked here also about blacking boots. That means shining boots. most of our shoes nowadays don't need to be shined every week. But in those years, they sure did. Because folks usually had only one pair of shoes, one pair of boots. They didn't have 2 or 3 or 4 like we do today. And so when Sabbath came, they shined them so that they would go to church with a nice-looking pair of shoes. And if they didn't, well, it didn't look very nice. So on. Well, you get the ideas, principles, applications, circumstances change, but the idea is the same. The principles are the same. Let's be careful about keeping Sabbath. Last week, we saw one regarding riding bicycles. You remember? She did tell us regarding riding bicycles that she made the comments that people should not spend their money riding bicycles and buying bicycles. But what were the principles there? We looked at the context very carefully. The context was it was a fad. It was something brand new. And what are the principles we got out of this illustration of the bicycle? Well, a couple one. There was poor stewardship. People were spending their savings on bicycles, whereas a few years later, bicycles began to be very cheap. They were spending their time, so poor stewardship of time and money. And then also there was competition, rivalry, and she was addressing these issues. These are principles. Now the bicycle is not an issue anymore. It's not a problem anymore. But you know the principles of poor stewardship of time and money, and the principle of competition and rivalry and doing like the neighbors do, are those principles still eternal and universal? You bet they are. And if some other fad or fashion comes up, these principles are still good. They're still good for us. So we don't need to discard what she says regarding the bicycle and say it's old-fashioned, it's out of date. No, it's not. It's not. The principles are still very valid today. They have a lot of good Christian sense for our own behavior. All right, so let's wrap it up. Let's wrap up what we've seen in these 2 weeks, in these lectures. 3 very simple rules. Oh, well, let me stop before I wrap up. Any questions regarding Sabbath, bicycles, or the last slide? Let's go back to that one. That was the bicycle example that we did last week. Yes. It was last week, earlier in the lectures. No, I added it today to Andrew's dismay. Deborah Ann. Oh, going to restaurants on Sabbath. Any thoughts? Any thoughts on going to restaurants on Sabbath?
If you pay with your credit card, you're not buying anything.
Stay with me, stay with me.
I'm not even talking about the issue of paying. Like some people have a problem with, if I'm not working, they are. So that's why because I'm sure that a lot of us in here are wondering, like, well, they're cooking, they're working, and so should we be a part of that process? That's what I want you to know.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the money aspect. That's a good issue.
That's a good question. It's a good question because it is a trend. It is a trend in Adventism to go to restaurants after church on Sabbath. Just like the Sunday folks do. They go to church on Sunday morning and then they go to a very late brunch if church is early. Or they will go, you just have to go to any place where there are a lot of restaurant alleys, and Sunday around noon it's jams. It's awful. All right, so what do we do? Well, let me give you my thoughts, and I'll take your hands if you want to comment on this idea. The issue is not necessarily paying. I think the issue is that the commandment says to me, and I'm talking about me here. The commandment says to me, thou shalt do no work, neither you nor your daughter or your son, your maidservant, your manservant, the ox, the donkey, or whoever is, and neither the strangers that is within thy gates. I find for myself personally that going to a restaurant on Sabbath is making somebody else work for me. And it is the man-servant issue. It is the stranger within my gate. I go there, and instead of me preparing my meal the day before, I go to the restaurant on Sabbath to have somebody else prepare it for me. And I think that's a conscience issue I have here with the commandment that tells me, let your servants rest also on Sabbath. They also need the rest. And I think we need to be mindful of that. I want to be mindful of that. I will admit that I have been in some situations because of traveling, not being able to make good preparations on Friday, where I needed to go eat something on Sabbath. Yes, nobody invited me for church, after church. And I didn't have any food with me. So I go to Subway quickly, get something, or go to Taco Bell and get something, or just go to a corner store and get a banana, an apple, or something to tie me up until after Sabbath when I can go get a good meal. But yeah, that has happened to me when traveling had made it difficult for me. But on a regular basis, I don't think that's something I would want to do. All right, so comments on Sabbath keeping in restaurants here. Let's keep it to that. Andrew, and okay, that'll take a few.
I have on Sabbath keeping, but I have a slight different issue, and that is both my wife and I run competitively, and some of our races, I don't run anything in Sabbath.
Sports event on Sabbath.
Yeah, like some of the
Races,
Olympic
games,
trials, races,
Olympic trials.
and all that stuff are on the Sabbath.
Well, I would invite you to watch Chariots of Fire.
I watched it already.
And Chariots of Fire is about the 1920 or 24, they're about, Olympic Games, 22 Olympic Games, when you had a Scotsman who was a track and field young man, a Presbyterian missionary who was the best there was in Great Britain at the moment in track and field, in particular sprints and races. And when he learned that the heats were going to be on Sunday, he decided not to compete. To the dismay of everybody, the Prince of Wales had an interview with him to try to convince him to run on Sunday. And he said, no, that's my Sabbath, and I will not compete on Sunday. I think I can transpose the whole story to Sabbath keeping. I think there's a point there. I think it's a good point.
But what if pleasure that is in Isaiah, because this is what we're struggling with in our family, that the pleasure that it said, thou shalt not do your pleasures in Isaiah and stuff like that.
Yes?
It's not a work. It's not even something for some people go for a walk, or some people go on a nice beach, whatever stuff if they live in California on Sabbath afternoon. I run for that. I don't like to walk, so I run. And how does that?
I'm not sure that I can be the arbiter of all situations and of all situations in which you find yourselves on Sabbath. I think you need to do a lot of praying on your own, contemplate on what the commandments say, try to understand what it says to you, and do your best with that. That's what I would say. That's what I would want to do. I would not compete in a competition on Sabbath. I don't think it would follow the spirit of what this commandment on the Sabbath is all about.
On what basis? That's my question.
On what basis? It's just that it has nothing to do with worship. It has nothing to do with rest. It's competitive. I mean, a competition on Sabbath has nothing to do with rest.
What is the purpose of the Sabbath?
It is to rest and to worship God.
We come back to what? To the Garden of Eden.
Yes.
You know, I don't think, my sport is basketball. When I was 17, I played semi-pro, and I would have kept going, and because of the Sabbath, once I converted at 18, I stopped playing basketball. I played for fun now. But I don't see it as work. I see it as something fun and as something I enjoy doing.
Okay, let me take a couple more hands. You had one. Don't give me special situations.
It's a little bit special, but maybe if you can't translate now, that's okay.
Go ahead.
Many immigrant families, when they come over to the U.S., they have to work so hard sometimes.
Yes.
Two or three jobs.
Yes.
And you find maybe some couples don't even see each other during the weekend, even when they do see each other.
Yes.
Maybe for an hour or two.
Yes.
Now, would you advise a couple maybe on Saturday to just take a day off and go to a park or just be somewhere alone by themselves
That's beautiful.
Sometimes even going to church, they are all busy up and down, and then sunset, and then they have to go back to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you. I mean, I sympathize not only for immigrant families, but there are a lot of people who are very stressed during the week. And when Sabbath arrives, it's a day of relaxation and downtime. And some people will go to church, and there they have positions in church, so they're very busy, and that stresses them even more. And sometimes, as you suggest, they will go to a park on Sabbath instead and take their Bibles along or books and read and rest. Beautiful. That's what the Sabbath is all about. I would agree. That's a good idea. Greg.
In specific regard to the idea that you said of having the waiter or waitresses as your servant and that whole thing, what would you say to somebody who turns and says, that person would have been working whether or not you came in or not? And
Yes.
specifically in your household, as the commandment would say, they aren't going to be keeping the Sabbath regardless of you.
Oh, that is very true, but I'm going to pay them to cook my food and to serve it to me. I'm going to pay them to do that. So they become my servants. They do. They become, that moment I pay them, they become my servants. They do. They do.
So I think this,
Jimmy?
for me, the thing with the eating out on Sabbath, and I was thinking about the same thing that you just brought up, but for me personally, I just the atmosphere of a restaurant, it's just not Sabbath-like to me. It's much better for me to be able to be in my home, where I'm with my family, just us, and in a Sabbath, and we're worshiping God instead of all these secular things that are going on, that
The
I'm so used to,
distractions.
that are happening all throughout the week.
The distractions, that's
It's more
right.
of an atmosphere than even the servant within my gates, because they're in their gates and not,
And I'm in their gates.
Exactly.
Frederick, and then I'll go across to Greg.
I was going to say that, okay, if I'm cooking in my home, and I'm not, trying to justify whatever some people might think is wrong. If I'm cooking at home, like the principle that Ellen White is putting forth, as was described to us by you, is that the principle is that we should, if we can avoid doing it on the Sabbath, then we should avoid doing it.
Yes.
Preparing food and
The big stuff, yes.
The big stuff like that.
Yes, yes,
So if I'm cooking at home,
yes,
I'm doing the work myself.
yes,
You know what I mean?
yes.
And it's like if somebody else is cooking it for me and it's convenient for the day, you know what I mean? And under different circumstances, then I don't understand what the big deal is. You know what I mean? Because it's like they're gonna get paid. You know what I mean? I'm going to the store. Yeah, they become my servants. You know what I mean? But it's like I just don't understand what the whole, what the big deal is.
Well, I don't know what you mean.
It seems kind of legalistic to me.
Well-
to go and be like, to go and say I'm paying you to cook my food.
Yes.
So you're my servant now.
Yes.
But I'm not supposed to have my servants doing the work. Well, I can just go home and do the work myself. You know
That's
what I mean?
that's
It seems
true,
kinda contradictory.
and that's okay. That would be a whole lot better. Yes. From my perspective, it would be. Well, let me raise perhaps an issue here. Not because you just mentioned it, but I'm sensing that here. The commandment does say, "Thou shalt not do any labor, this or that, on the Sabbath." Now, of course, there are varieties of labors and degrees of intensities of labor, but the commandment still says, "Thou shalt not do that on the Sabbath." And it is God that is speaking, and it is God that is saying that to us. Now, He has a purpose. He wants us to rest. He wants us to worship. He wants us to have a different day, a day that is special. 24 hours is special, but it is still a commandment. There are some prohibitions in the Bible that are called "thou shalt not." And it is to us, willingly, humbly, with faith and trust, to just bow down and to accept it. Is that too strong? I don't think it's legalistic. I don't think it's legalistic. I think it is to be obedient. Now, I understand that circumstances, home life may be different, and situations may be different, and so we may do things a little different from my home to your home. That's okay. I don't want to be pinpointing little details. But I think the whole idea is that "thou shalt not." Shall we obey? So we just simply obey. And with the guidance of the Holy Spirit and our conscience, to do it the best we can in the circumstances we find ourselves.
One of the things that I see that we're doing here is what happens in churches. We're bringing minute details to you and expecting you to give us
Yeah.
the right or wrong as to what we're to do. And that's what happens in church with pastors.
That's right. That's what you will do as pastors.
We don't do any studying, we don't do any praying, we don't do any seeking of the Lord ourselves.
That's right.
We go to the pastor and say, what should I do?
That's
And
right.
the pastor tells us what they should do based on his conviction.
And that's what's happening here. And I think you need to do a lot of praying about it. You need to do the praying. You need to do the thinking about it. And my situation is my situation, and I cannot be the arbiter of how you're going to do things. Let me just take a couple more, and then we'll wrap it up. Paul, and then Kyle, and then I forget your name.
It's about the going to restaurant after worship is just in my culture.
Yes.
Cooking is not a big issue in the church, basically, because in my culture, having meal after worship with church members is very important fellowship ministry.
Yes.
So cooking can be another ministry in the church as well, even in the Sabbath.
Yes.
My culture.
Okay.
So my concern is from my education, from my mother as a estate members. I just learned that just buying on Sabbath it is more important issue in this.
More important issue to buy on Sabbath than to cook on Sabbath. You see, there's a little bit of cultural changes there. That's okay. Yeah. Kyle.
Yeah, well, one thing I wanted to ask you was regarding principles in general and how they relate to each other. And my question is, because in general, I mean, we're talking about principles, general principles that apply to how we keep the Sabbath. So here's my question, and I know you're not going to be able to give an answer on this, definitively, but sometimes we have principles that conflict, or at times we have principles that interplay with each other. We may have two principles in any given situation, and we have to choose which one we're going to go with. An example is when Jesus had the principle of keeping the Sabbath or healing the man. Or in so many times when the work of healing, in his view, seemed to trump the principle of keeping the Sabbath.
Yes.
So my question is, when we look at these general principles that we can determine from Ellen White, specifically here on the Sabbath keeping, or other principles too, how do we determine which one is more weighty, which one we give the preference to? Are there any rules that we can keep in our minds when we're looking at principles and how to determine which one to give the most weight to in any given situation?
That's a beautiful question. It's a tough question, but it's a good one. When principles tend maybe perhaps to conflict in our situations, how do we determine which one is the best if we have to choose between two? And I don't know that I have a hard set rule to set for you, to give you, but I think it's between you and God and praying. A lot of things, that we're talking about here are personal issues. They're personal things. How you keep Sabbath, a lot of it is personal. What do you do with bicycles and your money and your time? And so on. A lot of these things are very, very personal. And it's in between you and your relationship with God. Let God and the Holy Spirit guide you in a spirit of prayer and attentive and to His guidance and leading. I would suggest that as an answer.
I mean, like, could we say, do you understand the Bible is saying in general, this is just a general idea, that people are what is most important to God?
Yes, by far.
And so sometimes that the principle of loving people can overshadow other principles that may play in.
A good point. A good point. I mean, people come first. People come first. Family comes first. If we've got to choose some things, yes, we'll do our best to do that. All right. Yes.
Earlier you made a statement that you saw in your own life that Sabbath keeping has become a little bit less of an issue or less important. And I don't know, I'm not.
Did I say that?
What you're saying, but maybe you were speaking generally that you place less emphasis.
In general, the North American population, Adventist population membership, seems to be a whole lot less strict and more relaxed about Sabbath keeping. Yes.
I think there's a correlation between our preparation to meet God, just as Moses, when he went up on the mountain, there was a time of
Good,
preparation
good.
to meet with God. I think that can be reflected
Thank you.
in our weekly preparation with that.
Thank you. That's good. A good comment. Very good. Folks, I need to wrap it up because we need to talk about the case study. All right? So, 3 simple rules that you can think, remember about, study everything she says on a subject before you draw your conclusions. Consider the context, internal, external circumstances, and then try to understand these principles and rules, if there are any, and how you do this. And I think if we follow these simple rules, we will avoid some extremism in regard to the writings of Ellen White. Perhaps we will understand them better, more deeply, but maybe we will see also the truthfulness of the message, and we'll be able to experience it in our lives. To go beyond a legalistic approach to a more deep and personal grasping and acceptance of what she's trying to say here. We don't discard anything, but we want to accept the essence of what is being said. So with that, let's pause, and that will be it for today, and then we'll go on into our case study.